what is the real Turkish game plan in Syria? That is the unanswered question as Turkey's involvement increases beyond it turning a blind eye to fighters and ammunition crossing over into Syria, adding to the foreign-backed chaos in its neighbor. While Erdogan's dream of seeing Assad ousted is now just that, it seems the desire to establish a buffer zone within Syria may have gotten the green light. Among talk of a Russian suggestion for a trilateral meeting between the leaders of Russia, Turkey and Syria, there is hope Turkey may come around to a more conciliatory, resolution-based stance on Syria. Certainly, the terror attacks, some of which were blamed on Daesh, may have been enough of a forewarning of the likely dangerous blowback. That and more in this debate.
Turkey opens a new front in northern Syria, where Ankara has already deployed a substantial force. On Saturday, new agencies aired images of the Turkish army trucks carrying tanks to the border. The tanks rolled into the Syrian territory from Turkey's Kilis province. Shortly afterwards, reports said the Turkish troops had entered the Syrian town of Al-Rey near the border to allegedly support an operation by the militant group calling itself the Free Syrian Army against Daesh. The FSA captured the Syrian town of Jarablus with the help of the Turkish forces days ago. Damascus has already condemned Ankara's incursion into the Syrian territory as a flagrant aggression and a violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Syria's allies, Russia and Iran, have also reacted to the Turkish incursion. Tehran has said the move will further complicate the situation in Syria, while demanding Ankara to respect the Arab nation's sovereignty. Moscow has also criticized Ankara over the matter. The Turkish military deployments in Syria have raised many questions as to the real motives behind Turkey's intervention in its southern neighbor. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said his country aims to carve out a safe zone in Syria without giving further details.
It's been desired by Obama, it's been desired by Biden, Joe Biden, Vice President, as well as Hillary Clinton in her half-delusional state. So their attempt to create a buffer zone that really Turkey can use to expand its geographic region is very clear. The countermeasure is going to be the next step, and that is what Russia and Syria decide to do. And I think inevitably they're going to be polite and respectful and tell Turkey that now that you've cleared the area of ISIS, you better leave immediately or we're going to make you leave. I think that's going to be the next step.
Some observers believe Turkey pursues multiple objectives in its war-torn neighbor through its military intervention. The main goal, they maintain, is to push back Kurdish fighters from the border regions.
Turks have a very deep concern about the Kurds. They always have. It's a historical, cultural, ethnic issue. Now is the time for really the Russians and Assad and Iran and the other coalition members to step in and ensure that the U.S. does not push Turkey into making any serious incursions that could be construed as an open declaration of war by Assad.
The observers also say fighting Daesh is merely a front for the real objectives Turkey pursues in Syria. The Turkish government has repeatedly called for regime change in Syria, though Ankara has toned down its rhetoric against the Syrian government following the mid-July abortive coup. Apart from what is motivating Turkey's role in the Syria conflict, it is widely believed that Erdogan's government has made a dangerous gambit as it has ignored calls to avoid being sucked into what many call a vortex in Syria.
Let me now introduce our guests for this debate. We're joined by independent researcher and writer, Ms. Soraya Sepahpur-Ulrich, who is joining us live from California. And we're also joined from the American Institute for Foreign Policy by Mr. Michael Lane, who is joining us live from Washington. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Lane, I'll start with you. How do you feel about Turkish incursions into Syria? Is Erdogan aiming to finally install this buffer zone within Syrian territory that he's for so long demanded?
Well, I agree with quite a bit that was mentioned in your setup piece. The most important part, of course, that this is a very dangerous gambit on the part of Turkey and President Erdogan. I think they have multiple objectives that they're looking at here. The establishment of a safe zone between the anti-Turkish forces, and which would be, of course, the PKK and the border of Turkey, is but one of them. The other objectives that Turkey has had over the last couple years has been the departure, of course, of President Assad of Syria, and the third one would be to ensure that the Syrian Kurds don't have the ability to establish what is or is perceived to be or looks like their own independent state, because it gives the Kurdish Turks their own ideas about having their own independent state. And that's something that Erdogan has fought against from the very beginning. In fact, it's been a long-standing problem between the Kurds and the Turks. So some of those objectives are self-contradictory. And as you look at where Erdogan is today, he's making very quick moves to shift his alliances and get a new team of partners. It was only a very short time ago that Erdogan and Putin wouldn't give each other the time of day, and now they're pretty good buddies and they're cooperating on a lot of things. I note that Russia was, they were critical, but they were pretty subdued in their criticism of Turkey's rolling across the border and engaging the forces in Syria. The one thing it looks to me that probably Turkey has concluded is that of all their objectives, the one they're going to have to drop is that President Assad is not going to have to leave Syria, because that will result in a weakened Syria, even though the Turks and the Syrians and Assad have been at each other's throats. The simple fact of the matter is a weaker Syria creates a stronger, relatively Kurdish force, which leads to the possibility of a Kurdish state, and Erdogan wants to prevent that at all costs. So he is looking like he's willing to tolerate an extended stay by President Assad in Syria in return for being an inside player in the coalition.
Okay, Ms. Sepapor, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the Turkish incursions?
Well, it's a clear invasion of another country, and I do not for a moment believe it could have been carried out without, contrary to what Mr. Lane says, without the blessings of the United States. And I think that it has been in the making for a while. If you do follow policy papers here in America, you realize that this was all part of a plan. And in fact, on June 30th of this year, the pro-Israeli Washington Institute for Near East Policy had a very interesting paper, and the title was "Tuesday Changed Everything," and it was referring to the terrorist attacks at the Ankara airport, international airport. And it opined, what Washington Institute did, it opined that although this Turkish people had been very much against Turkey's ground invasion into Syria, this would actually make them change their mind. And the only problem at the time that was foreseen was that Russia would not allow it. In fact, after the incident whereby Turkey shut down a Russian plane, Russia created a kind of no-fly zone and would not have allowed the incursion. And in this paper, it was again discussed that Turkey needed Russia's blessings to have a military incursion into Syria. And lo and behold, we have a failed coup, which makes everyone believe, including myself initially, that there had been a genuine coup against Erdogan and that the CIA may have been behind it. Now I'm firmly of the opinion that actually might have been a coup with the United States and not by the United States, because everyone was so eager to embrace Turkey into the fold, being a NATO member, an Islamic State that was fighting Assad, that everyone was too happy and too eager to believe that Turkey would switch sides. And the dynamics on the ground would change. But this really enabled Erdogan to play a devilishly clever game and invade the sovereign state of Syria. Killing the Kurds, which have always been, America's always played the Kurdish card. They pretend they support their autonomy. They fund them like they did when the Kurds were encouraged to rebel against Iraq's central government by the CIA, by America, and by the Shah of Iran, after which they withdrew their support, and so many Kurds were killed. We see the exact same scenario happening here in Turkey and Syria, doing the same thing. So yes, I do believe that there's a lot of room for concern, but I don't believe for a moment that Washington and the state of Israel are not behind Turkey in this incursion.
Okay, so Mr. Lane, if Turkey is being egged on to get involved in Syria, and you know it's been the route essentially, hasn't it, for ammunition and fighters anyways? So it's turned a blind eye for a very long time to the situation in Syria and allowed it to get to the point that it has right now, with Daesh flourishing and other militants flourishing as well within the country. So I'm wondering, do you think Turkey changing its mind about all this?
Yes, as I said in my first answer, I think that we see President Erdogan making a bunch of decisions, consecutive decisions, which are changing the way Turkey is approaching this whole thing. As you point out, not more than a couple months ago and for an extended period of time before that, they either turned a blind eye to what Daesh was doing, or they actively winked and nodded and assisted in what they were doing because they saw that as a way to weaken President Assad and achieve their objective of having him removed from the presidency in Syria. Well, now they've discovered that that's not going to work. So part of what their incursion has been, and I will stipulate that the United States probably knew in advance that what Turkey was going to do, and certainly we didn't have any critical words at all for what Turkey has done. So I think you can read into that there was at least some support for what Turkey has done. I think that Turkey, or Mr. Erdogan, has decided that by damaging President Assad, he is creating a Kurdish problem for himself, and he doesn't want to do that. So he is now turned against ISIS. And while he is conducting these cross-border incursion attacks on Syrian territory against the Islamic State in Syria, he is also, oh, by the way, taking advantage of the opportunity to hit the Kurds at the same time. So he's getting sucked in. It's a matter of his judgment as to how long and how deeply he wants to go. But at this point, the ball's in Mr. Erdogan's court. He's the one making the decisions, and it seems as if he has been fairly deft at making the changes and pivoting Turkey's policies in the direction that they are now in a matter of a mere month.
Okay, so Ms. Sabapur, I'm kind of confused about the U.S. position here because, you know, YPG Kurds are supported by the United States because, this is the public statements, at least the United States is seemingly angry with Turkey for attacking YPG Kurds because, you know, they're supported, they're meant to be fighting against Daesh. So is America playing a double game here almost?
It always has done. I mean, if you read the Pike Commission in 1972, Nixon wanted to use the Kurds against the central government of Baghdad to not only weaken it, but it was a step being taken against the, at the time, Soviet Union. So the the Kurds have always been used, and it's very unfortunate because they betray their host countries or the countries that they belong to, as well as get betrayed. And, you know, they keep making the Kurdish leaders make these trips to Israel because they know the door to Washington is through Israel. They go there to sort of grovel for autonomy and seek Israel's help, which Israel's happy to provide as long as the Kurds can be used against their main target. And in this instance, it is Syria's President Assad. So Washington has always played this double game. Washington has zero sympathy for the Kurds, for the Iraqis, for the Turks, or anybody else for that matter. Number one of Washington's objective is, its expansionist global agenda. And of course, the people that coined the policies in Washington are pro-Israel or Israelis. So these are the only two countries that are really close allies, and not to mention Great Britain has always been part of this axis.
Okay, so Mr. Lane, I want to, of course, get your reaction to what Ms. Sabapur there said, but I wanted to add this on, if you allow me. If we can talk politics for a while and any efforts at peace within Syria. It's been reported in certain media outlets, such as Gulf News as well, that Russia has suggested some sort of a trilateral meeting to take place at some point within September. Hopefully, that's what the Russians are hoping for, between the Russian, Turkish, and Syrian leadership, face-to-face meeting behind closed doors, obviously. But I'm wondering, A, do you think that will happen? And B, do you think that Turkey is willing to compromise? Because Turkey seems from day one, as you said, of course, to have just wanted President Assad to go.
Yes, let me address the response to my colleague first, and then answer your question directly. I think the Kurds in Syria were as surprised as anyone that the United States essentially just sort of, failed to back them up. When they wind up in a hostile situation with another force, they are our best on-ground fighting ally against ISIS in the theater. They've done a great job. We've supported them. It's been a long-standing relationship. And when Turkey turns its guns on them, I think the Kurds were surprised to find out that there were limits as to how much support the United States was willing to give them under those circumstances. I think, some damage has been done to the relationship between the United States and the Kurds. I think it's repairable, but it certainly was a surprise, and it was a surprise to me, actually, that President Obama did not stipulate pretty strongly to President Erdogan that there were certain activities that would be off limits, and attacking the Kurds would be one of them. Now, to go to the suggestion that that the Russians have suggested a trilateral meeting between Syria, Turkey, and Russia, I read this with intrigue. I do think that ultimately it will happen. I think this is part of the Erdogan current strategy of changing his relationships and changing his alliances, because the old ones didn't seem to be working out to get him where he wanted to be. And as I've mentioned earlier in this show, when you have competing objectives and they're exactly opposite each other, and you have to decide which one you're going to jettison, it appears to me as if what President Erdogan is doing is he's moving in the direction of accepting President Assad as the long-term leader of Syria after this is over. That would make the outcome of a trilateral meeting successful. It would allow Syria and Turkey to reestablish relations which have been non-existent for the last 5 years. And I do anticipate that meeting will happen, and that there will be a better relationship between the two countries. Whether or not that will lead to peace, I don't know, but it certainly will lead to significant longevity for Assad's reign in Syria.
Ms. Sepahpour, how do you feel about any trilateral meeting and what may happen?
Well, I'd like to think that there will be peace, but there will be no peace until Turkey and Russia did not start this. Neither did Syria. Turkey, with full cooperation from Washington, was behind introducing and helping Daesh. So why would it suddenly change its mind and decide that Assad can stay? I mean, Assad has never been the issue from the onset. The only reason they wanted Assad removed was because Assad was not going along with the geopolitical games that the United States, Turkey, Israel, and the complicit Arab states had for Syria and the region. Now, unless Mr. Assad, President Assad, suddenly changes his mind and says, okay, I will stop being loyal to my country and become complicit in your plans for Syria, then I don't foresee the United States or Turkey or anybody else wanting to have President Assad in place, although he is the most popular president and overwhelming majority of the Syrians support him. So I think the question to ask here is, why did we start having this notion of wanting to remove President Assad in the first place by the United States, by Turkey, with Daesh, and with the other Arab states? And once you answer that question, then you understand the reason as to why, and then you'll know that Turkey is playing a big game, just as Washington is. So I think that it's good to be optimistic, it's good to be hopeful, but that's not going to solve the issue. We need to be informed, we need to understand why there was this assault on Syria and what Turkey's role was from the onset.
Okay, we just have about 2 minutes left. So, Mr. Lane, I wanted to get your final comments and ask you, Ms. Sepahpour there brought up a very good point. From day one, it was the United States, it was Turkey, it was all these countries asking for President Assad to go, and some of them still insisting on that, by the way. So I'm wondering, what has changed?
Well, what has changed was Russia's intervention on Syria's behalf about 6 months or longer ago. It was a long, very, very difficult campaign. But ultimately, I think that the Syrian government was being degraded and they were ultimately going to lose over the course of a long time, and Assad was going to have to negotiate his own departure or be sent out. When Russia intervened on Syria's side, it was a total, complete game changer. Assad is now in a position of power. He's in a position of influence. People see this and recognize this. They want to be his friend now rather than his enemy. This is an example of why President Erdogan, in my judgment, will want to have this meeting and reestablish relations with Assad. This is all because of Russia's intervention. It accrues benefits to Russia, influence to Russia, geopolitical status to Russia, and it comes at the expense of the United States. And that's just a simple fact.
Mr. Papour, do you agree? Has the United States lost this game?
I'm not sure. The United States has not given up. And in fact, I mentioned this when the battle was being won in Aleppo. I said the United States has invested so much time, so much money, and so much reputation in toppling President Assad, and that it will not give up so easily. And I don't believe for a moment that Turkey or Erdogan thinks that Assad can stay in power. They just have too much to lose after having committed so many crimes, and I can't call it war crime because it's not a declared war. All these crimes, they're not just going to give up and go home and say, okay, President Assad can stay. It's not going to happen.
Very well. We'll leave it there at that point. But of course, we do appreciate both of your contributions to this debate. That was independent researcher and writer, Ms. Soraya Sepahpour-Ulrich, who had been speaking to us live from California. And from the American Institute for Foreign Policy, we were joined with Mr. Michael Lane, who had been speaking to us live from Washington. And of course, viewers, we appreciate you joining us as well. Until next time, good night.